Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. South Dakota is always looking for new markets to sell their goods and services, and here to talk about that is City Councilor Pat Starr. Thanks for joining us. Let's visit a little bit about what is Sioux Falls and South Dakota looking at in terms of global markets.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that's exciting about being on the Sioux Falls City Council is often I get to fill in for the mayor. He's got a very busy schedule, so there's the normal meet and greet things and welcome to Sioux Falls things. And one of the things that I didn't know was going on, but I found out, is that we had a trade delegation here in the last month from Egypt. Actually, the ambassador to the United States from Egypt was in South Dakota looking at a number of products and things that we do. And specifically, they wanted to buy 10 million metric tons of soybeans. They understand the trade wars that we have going on. Representative Michael Saba was in the Peace Corps, and it's kind of a really neat story. As part of going through that process, he met people all over the world, and he grew up basically in his 20s with the ambassador, who's now the ambassador to the United States. And so they reconnected not long ago and Michael said, you need to come to South Dakota and see what we're doing with our biotechnology, what we're doing with our ag products, and we have the best grown soybeans in the world. And currently, the Egyptian population is almost 95.5 million people. So it's probably it's larger than Germany, about a third of the United States population. And sometimes we forget how big Egypt is and how important agriculture is. And so currently, they buy a lot of their grain from South America, whether it's Brazil, Argentina, and trying to set up smaller markets, but larger ones with the trade war that we're in the process with China right now. But what's interesting is when they were here, they bought the 10 million metric tons of soybeans. They were buyers. They weren't here just to tour. And it was cool that they were really specific that they had to line up the transportation because they didn't want any Iowa soybeans mixed in, or they didn't want Minnesota soybeans. They were very specific of what they were doing. But they also met with our other businesses in the community. They were here for 3 days. They were a day in Sioux Falls, a day in Brookings, and then they went up to Aberdeen to the soybean processing facilities. But they met with some of our banking community. It opens up a new market for our local bankers and fire equipment apparatus that we make in this part of the country. They got to visit with some of the students who are here from Egypt that are students at South Dakota State University that continue the same thing on that Representative Saba did to bring them here. And so to continue those things on. I got a chance to meet a former student or a graduate of SDSU, and he spent some time in Egypt and was able to speak with the ambassador and the things that he learned about the country. And of course, we got the invitation to go to Egypt. So next summer, maybe we'll be looking at something where we could figure out a trip to Egypt and have the ambassador bring us. But it's so important that we have those worldwide markets. It's so, like I said, the reason that I'm so excited about this story is that whether it was the Peace Corps, whether it was the things that we do, it's the relationships and getting to people to meet people in our world economy.
You know, when we were young, you look at the world like it was this huge, giant place, and you'd never, ever get to know anybody from all these different cultures. Absolutely. But the world is shrinking with technology. You know, people may ask, well, while it might be good for South Dakota, how does that help Sioux Falls when we sell soybeans to other countries?
Well, our economy in South Dakota, not just Sioux Falls, the thing that I try to remind people all the time is we're not Sioux Falls against Brookings. We're not Sioux Falls against Brandon. We're a region, and we need to work together as South Dakotans because all of the population of South Dakota, a lot of them come here to shop, to do business, to do medical. And when our ag community suffers, our entire state suffers. Sioux Falls suffers from not being able to sell in the downturn in the ag economy, whether it's the trade wars, whether it's pricing, and doing those things. But this story had so many really cool angles to it, just getting to know people, exchanging students, the biotechnology, the things that we have going on, as well as opening markets. And the bottom line, they bought something while they were here, and they spent almost $1 million in goods, and that will continue. but it got our local ag banking business people involved. They were able to open that market that maybe through the whole Middle East that they're going to be able to do some banking. Again, we're in a world economy. We have that potential for jobs and bringing people to Sioux Falls and the talent that we have in our community.
Do you think this would, you talked about the fire apparatus, and do you think we have other things to offer to not just Egypt, but to other countries, either in the Middle East or even in Europe, everywhere?
Absolutely. We have some of the highest tech all the way, down from our colleges and our universities where we're educating people to be part of the world economy. But the manufacturing things that we have, as well as our ag products, are going all over the world. And so being able to have those experiences and to be able to reach out and actually shake the hand of the ambassador and having them understand what it means. Walt Bones had them down to his dairy farm, and they came back smelling a little bit more like a dairy farm by the time they were done, and understanding where that comes from. But it's also good for our kids to understand that milk doesn't come from Hy-Vee.
Right.
Or at least it does eventually, but at the beginning, it's all the processing jobs that happen with it, whether it's our investing in our research parks, investing in the industrial parks, and continuing to provide manufacturing. And we can compete with anybody in the world. We just have to get past that we're competing with Brookings or Aberdeen or Yankton or Sioux City. We're all part of the same region, and that's what's good for our economy.
Great. Well, we have lots of other things to talk about. Do you want to move on to, we have the ramp going on downtown. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know it's been a hot topic lately.
Well, one of the things, and where I go all the time, is I think people ask, what's going on with the ramp? And what are we doing? And so in the last month, we've had to invest another $1.5 million because the deal has fallen apart to finish out the ramp. Originally, we had planned, or the plan was to have 200 parking spots open in November of 2019. We missed that deadline. But what we needed to do to invest an additional $1.5 million was to close up the elevator shafts to make it safe so that we can open the entire 500 parking spots. We continue to need additional parking in downtown Sioux Falls. It's been shown in the Walker study, the consultants we brought in, the reason we went forward with this project was to do that. So to make it safe and to make it usable, and to look at a June of 2020 opening, we needed to make that additional investment, again, to make it safe and so that the community can use it and continue to move on with businesses downtown.
Do you see further development in that area?
Absolutely. But I think we're on a timeline that, the lawyers have to go through the process and make that all work. But I think we'll see something. But I think realistically, we're 3 to 5 years out from seeing something finished. It's going to be ugly for a while. It's not going to be the most attractive thing in downtown Sioux Falls. Hopefully we can turn somebody loose with some murals and try to clean it up. What people are really excited about is 10th Street's back open again. We're able to move some of that on. So it really is the linchpin for future development in other places of downtown Sioux Falls. So we need to continue to work towards coming to a solution that we can all live with by the time. It was probably a bad decision at the time. It continues to be a bad decision, and we're trying to make the best of it that we can.
Well, you have to move forward because
Absolutely.
the decision was already made. And what would be the best outcome in, even if you're looking at 5 to 10 years, what would you envision for that area?
Well, I think, again, the additional 500 parking spots is something that matters to downtown. There are businesses that are being held up right now because they can't expand because they don't have parking. We're not ready for autonomous cars yet, but we're getting closer, and we're seeing some of those things that are happening. But I think we'll see eventually the retail development that we expected to be part of that. I think there will be a hotel in that location. When you talk to the CVB and groups downtown, we need probably for this economy 650 hotel rooms. So that addition, the additional hotel rooms that we have, future development, whether it's Sioux Steel and some of those things, if we get to that in a little bit, will get us closer to 600, 650. So we're getting to where we need to be. But I think we need that downtown space, whether it's convention, business, and things that continue to grow downtown. So I think it'll work itself out. It's just going to be very expensive for the taxpayers when you make a mistake like this.
And you have some liquor licenses that you wanted to talk about?
Absolutely. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time on the council is regulating alcohol. And alcohol regulations are probably one of the most difficult things to understand because a lot of our laws, our state statutes, go back to Prohibition days and how we handled it in pre and post Prohibition. So trying to not commingle alcohol in different places, licensing, and those type of things. So the other night we spent some time, we had some businesses that had some failures with selling to underage people as part of the stings, and it's not fun. The business owners don't want to do it. Some of the stories that you hear, you know, that the employees just made a mistake. But we have to be vigilant in not selling alcohol to underage people in our city. And when you fail a compliance sting, you have to come in front of the council. And unfortunately, the front part of the meeting went longer and they ended up having to sit there for a couple hours. And then it's humbling to have to come before us and explain why they failed and what they're going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen. And for a lot of people, they've gone 5-10 years and have never had a failure, and one out of the blue just happens. Right. The other thing that we're talking about alcohol and licensing right now is looking at, Councilor Erickson and Selberg have brought a change to how do we give new licenses as we continue to grow, and do we create secondary markets and values of licensing. And so it seems like in the last month or 6 weeks we've spent a lot of time talking alcohol. And then No, you're going to go right where I want to head next.
Well, there's some differences in alcohol licensing. You have beer and wine, and then you have hard liquor. What's the difference? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. The beer and wine licenses are separate, but they're unlimited basically. So there's never been really a lot of confusion between the two. So if you want to sell beer or wine, it's pretty much open to what you do. Liquor licenses have become their own entity, and the resale market. Right now, when we create a new license or our population grows enough so that we can issue a new license, we sell it for roughly $1 per person. So if you wanted a new license, it's right around $192,000 is where we're at. Census numbers will adjust that. The last license that I kind of heard anecdotally was sold for about $380,000.
Because if you own it, you can sell it to someone else.
Correct. It's yours that is move on. So a lot of businesses, especially more family-owned, mom and pop type of places, look at it as their retirement because it goes up in value over time and it's cheaper than new licenses and they can be transferred. And so it's an asset that they use just like any other asset in their business. So, but I think we're at that point, do we need to continue to limit the number of licenses? And that's the thing that we've done is we've spent a lot of time holding back maybe some growth. And so 4 or 5 years ago, the legislature said, all right, let's develop a liquor license that's just for restaurants. So 60% of the business has to come from the sale of food. But it's the same price, or we sell those for $260,000, or the city sells them for $260 or $60,000. Sorry. The thing that it makes that tough is if you drop below 60% food, you lose that license and you lose that investment. And there isn't a secondary market, at least at this point, for that license. So it really risks. We had a new business come to town, Dave & Buster's, which people are really excited about, and it's part of the development on the west side of town. They really felt that they were concerned that they weren't sure where they would be at with food sales compared to the rest of the sales. So they went to the secondary market and bought a license. So we're not really holding some of these national companies up, but at the same time, it's a major investment to open a new restaurant without being able to serve liquor. I think we've seen it in downtown. There's some businesses people that want to open smaller restaurants, and to make a $300,000 investment in a liquor license is really prohibitive for people who are trying to do that.
Do you see that expanding in the future? And does it have to go through the legislature? And has
It does have to go through the legislature, and it's one of those things, I don't think we're ready to go to an unlimited, because what do we do with the people who are counting on this license as an asset, a retirement, or if the stability that they build their business around. So that's how do we protect those people with the investment they've made, but maybe we're at that same point. I made the same argument with video lottery not that long ago, where why do we limit 10? Why is 10 machines in an establishment the number? And so we're seeing it. I just went through building permits yesterday. We're seeing a lot of video lottery casinos splitting into two so that they can have 20 machines. Why don't we just give them 25 machines and be done? And is it going to create a larger problem? I'm not seeing 60 or 100 or full-scale video lottery casinos, but is 10 that actual number? And maybe that's something. It's always easier to tell the legislature what to do than, I do it with the school board all the time too. So it'd be easier, but I'm not on that part of it. So.
Okay.
The third part of liquor license that we're spending a lot of time with is the off-sale licenses. And local businesses, are you serving to people who are already intoxicated? How does it affect the neighborhood? Where do they go after they buy high alcohol content drinks that are very inexpensive? I use the product Camo all the time as an example. It's the equivalent of 5 beers in a 40-ounce can for $1.69. It's ridiculous, the amount and the intent, because it tastes like trash. I mean, there's no reason to drink this stuff other than to become intoxicated. And there's no social redeeming part of that. And then seeing what happens when people overconsume, and how do we help people who do that are addicted to alcohol? And where do we move them in the neighborhood? If we take someone's license away and we move things around, where's the core to the solution? And is it in the licensing process? And what responsibility does that business owner have if they are profiting from selling these type of products?
Okay. Well, at this point, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the National League of Cities and a whole host of other topics. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, Dr. Score here from Falls Community Health. It's that time of year again, and time to get your annual flu shot. Influenza causes thousands of deaths per year, many of which are preventable by this vaccine. A common misconception is that the flu shot can cause the flu, but this is completely untrue. The flu vaccine itself is inactive. Any discomfort you feel afterwards is your body's reaction to the shot, preparing it to fight illness. Please get your annual flu vaccination. This is available at any hospital, clinic, or pharmacy near you.
Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are visiting with City Councilor Pat Starr. We're going to turn our attention to the National League of Cities. What is that, and how does it impact Sioux Falls?
Absolutely. One of the things, though, Madeline, that I wanted to say first, the serving on the City Council is such a great honor. It seems like, though, there are two really distinct ways that I spend my time. Some of it is, all right, there's potholes and people drive too fast through my neighborhood and the day-to-day issues of what we're doing. But the thing the charter really tells us we're supposed to be doing is having that long-range vision for our community. What do we need to do to make our community successful 20 and 30 and 40 years? I always say that the reason Sioux Falls is successful at this point in time is what happened 20 and 30 years ago. Some of the decisions that were made, the forward thinking to invest in our parks, our bike trails, our transportation, the zoning things that we do to manage the growth of our city and what we do. So I always try to force myself to say, okay, is this going to matter 20 years from now? What are we going to do that matters 30 years from now, so that we can look back and say, hey, I was part of that. It's kind of self-serving at the same time, but we want to make our city a better place when we're done. So one of the things that we do as a city council is we are members of the National League of Cities. It's an organization that works with people from all over the country, from small communities the size of Yankton or Brookings, all the way to sizes of Detroit and Los Angeles and through. So this last year, the national conference was in San Antonio. 4 of us from the council were able to go, as well as the mayor's assistant chief of staff, and really learn that some of the issues that we have as a city of Sioux Falls are faced across the country. And so there were 4,000 people who came together to maybe find those solutions for long-term issues and things that we can collaborate together and to see the latest technology, the latest parks equipment, to see how the host community is doing that. One of the things that I like about this conference more than any other is that they do a lot of mobile tours. So they put you on a bus and we go to the homeless shelter. We go, a program that I was really intrigued by is that they put, the city of San Antonio has put a program together for kids who are between 16 and 24 who are not in school and aren't working. What do we need to get them to do to engage? And a lot of that involves solving some of their trauma issues. Some of it involves housing. Some was as simple as doing a resume for some, or just being able to find their birth certificates or social security cards, the things that we kind of take for granted when we've been in the workforce. But if you're 16 or 17, you're homeless, your parents are have drug and alcohol issues or mental health issues, what do we do? What training for the programs that are there? So you get a chance to bring them all together. It was a very intriguing morning of how this program was really making a difference. And we're doing a lot of those things in Sioux Falls. We're just not necessarily doing them all in one spot.
Do you think as time goes on, those are more the kind of social issues that we're going to have to deal with as a city?
Absolutely. And I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are able to help people to get them to be productive citizens. We talk about two things all the time, especially when you're a candidate. You talk about workforce development and you talk about housing. And they're the buzzwords that we all use, but what does that mean? How do we find those solutions? How do we get 18-year-olds who aren't going to school or have completed a high school education, but they don't know where to go next, and they're not involved in the community? That's our workforce. That's how we need to do that training. Some is my son, who's 17 years old, and trying to get him to figure out what he's going to do with his life, but putting him in the right place and having the right experiences so that he can be a productive member of our society. The other part of that is housing. It was a huge part of this conference talking about everyone's facing the same issue. But when we talk about housing, housing really is a wage issue. It's about people being able to pay for their housing. We have great programs already in place for people who are elderly, that are disabled, that have mental health issues. Those programs exist. Where we struggle, and I'm sure you see this too, is that we have people that either lose a job or can't afford the cost of housing. Housing has exploded, and if wages would have matched the inflationary factors in housing, we wouldn't have a housing problem. So it really comes down to, do we need to educate? Do we need to get people better jobs? Or do we as a city need to do what it takes to recruit jobs that pay better so that people can afford their own housing? And I've said this for the last year and a half or so. I don't want to work on housing. I want to work on things that bring jobs that pay to our community so people can pay for their own housing and aren't housing insecure. And I don't get all the terminology out correctly. I'm learning it by the time we're done. But from what I can see, if you make $12 an hour at a local box store, you can't support your family. And it doesn't matter. And the people who are struggling most in our community, and it's the same all over the country, they're not lazy people who are sitting on the couch watching Netflix. It's people who are working a full-time job, and then they're working an additional 10 to 20 hours a week, if not more, to try to raise their families. And then what happens is they're not able to raise their kids. They're not able to go to programs where their kids are singing and all the things that we do through the holidays. They're not able to participate in the sports programs that we do and the other things, and kids are raising themselves. And so then we end up raising them, government ends up stepping in, whether it's the school or the city. And I talk a lot about the Oakview Library, and the librarian there is working with Feeding South Dakota to provide after-school snacks. And it's not for parents who are lazy or aren't working. They're working, and they're not picking their kids up until 6 or 7 o'clock. And the daycare has turned into the public library. So.
Well, and those are just all challenges that we see over and over again when you're making $12 an hour. You have an 18-year-old that graduates from high school. They can't get an apartment, and they don't, college is not for everyone, and it's expensive. And to when all your friends have gone to college or gone to a different school, who do you get as a roommate? Do you, there's that trepidation of, do I live with a stranger? And how does that implode? And so I can see the challenges with the housing, and with anybody can get a roommate, but is it a good match?
Well, college is like that. I remember,
Right, right.
all the issues that, just someone new that you've never had to live with, and
Right.
mom's not there to make sure dinner's on the table and your clothes are clean, and all the things that are the challenges of growing up aren't
Yes.
there. But, I spoke with someone from the university system not that long ago, and one of the things that we need to do in Sioux Falls that I would throw out as a challenge, we have 7,000 post-secondary kids in Sioux Falls. And I shouldn't say kids, it's young adults and it's older adults that are retraining and doing that. We have to make education more affordable. We have to find a way so that people can do tech school. We have the highest priced tech schools in the region, and make it, that kids are graduating, or young people or people are graduating with a large amount of debt that they can't pay when they get a $17 an hour job with their trades. But the trades are paying better than they've ever paid, and to encourage kids to do that. But we've got to find that way to get them there. And part of that is making it more affordable. But out of that 7,000, we've got to get to a point as a community this size to be closer to 20,000. And that goes from Augustana to the University of Sioux Falls to USD and Madison. And again, talking about the region, and we're not competing with Vermilion and Madison and Brookings. They need to be on the same team. So we need to bring more companies to Sioux Falls and encourage them, like SAB Biotherapeutics, that the city's invested in helping them, as well as the university and the state, and trying to bring all of those things together. So the National League of Cities was a great opportunity to look at some of those challenges and say, we're not alone, but how do we fix it?
Okay, let's move on to Sioux Steel. What's happening in downtown Sioux Falls with the Sioux Steel site?
It is awesome. The development that we're looking at. I had a chance this last week to talk to the developer and with Craig Lloyd and Lloyd Companies of what they're proposing and coming forward. The big part of that that's really exciting is the park and the area that people don't know that's there, the green space, the continuation of the Levitt. So the River Greenway, and I believe this is the third phase of developing the River Greenway. So the park system that'll be part of it, and the bike trails that'll will go with it, is a big part of that. In the next couple of months after the first of the year, the city's looking at somewhere in that $50 to $70 million bond issue, which includes a new training facility for our police and fire departments. It's going to refinance some bonds depending on where things come in, and then we're going to spend $7 to $10 million probably in fixing the River Greenway portion of where this that wraps around the Sioux Steel area. And again, maybe it's because it's been 3.5 years, but being on the council, I spent a lot of time talking about, okay, what did I say as a candidate? What have I done? Type of things. And the one thing we talked a lot about was the railroad redevelopment area, and making sure that that happens correctly and that the things were there. We sold some land to Mr. Schurslick to continue on that. I think is going to be a great part of that. And now with the Sioux Steel plan just being announced in the last month, the community is going to get a chance to see a ton of things that happen. It's a great development that he has, from a parking ramp that's attached to a hotel, that will attach to condos, and then will attach to some Class A office buildings. It will continue to build our downtown urban environment that that our young people are looking for in a community of where they want to locate. Sure. We have to have that housing and office space that's attractive, and then the nightlife and the culture that goes with it, from the investment the city's made in the Levitt, the Cascades that are finishing up and finishing, and being able to build a parking ramp so that people can come and be part of a continuing growing downtown.
I've worked just on the east side of downtown for 15 years, and I have seen the changes of the number of people downtown, after work hours, and walking anywhere from, 5 p.m. until 10 or 11 p.m. at night. Do you see that as how downtown Sioux Falls has grown and the different amenities that have been added?
Well, I think it's both. I think we've made an investment in our downtown. We've done some really important things that spurred that growth. going all the way back to the River Greenway and Fawwick Park. I actually said that right. I never say it right by the time with the Statue of David and movies in downtown. But millennials are looking for that urban lifestyle where they can walk and be part of the community. And we've added the arts, we've added music, we've added, the 20th anniversary of the Washington Pavilion, and the numbers of people that are there. My daughter's in a Dapper performance that's happening right now, and you can't find a place to park because REO Speedwagon was there. And but the food culture, the breweries, the amenities that just naturally go, and that's the role of government. We plant that seed, we put the things in place and give businesses the tools to go out and do what it takes to be successful. There's that public-private partnership. And when you do it with people you trust and that are looking at the future of Sioux Falls, that's exactly it. And I believe Craig Lloyd and his company are one of those companies to partner with that really makes sense in the Sioux Steel from a city perspective. I'm sure with the Risden family, it makes sense for them, and they've worked their part of the business part of it out. But this takes us in the next step.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us for Inside Town Hall, and we will catch up with you again next time. Well, that's our time for this episode. We'll see you next month. Thanks for watching.